They thought they had the perfect plan. 2 officers, a planted bag of drugs, and a story they had told dozens of times before. But this time, they chose the wrong person. The road was dark, illuminated only by the eerie blue and red flashes of police lights cutting through the still night air in Atlanta. Officer Travis Holt leaned casually against his squad car, a smug grin on his face, as his partner, Mike Jenkins, rifled through the trunk of a sleek black sedan. The vehicle's owner, Emily Jones, stood quietly by the roadside, her expression calm and unreadable. "Ma'am," Holt said, his tone dripping with insincere politeness. "Routine traffic stop. But we noticed something suspicious back there. Care to explain?" Emily, a poised black woman in her late 30s, tilted her head slightly. "Suspicious? Like what?" Jenkins slammed the trunk shut and swaggered over, holding a small bag of white powder aloft like a trophy. His grin mirrored Holt's. "This for starters." Emily's dark eyes flicked to the bag, then back to Jenkins. Her face remained impassive, betraying none of the anger or shock she felt. "That's not mine." Yeah, Holt said, waving her off. "You can save it for the judge, sweetheart. Let's just say your kind of story isn't exactly new to us." Emily clenched her fists behind her back, her nails digging into her palms. She knew exactly what was happening. It wasn't her first brush with corruption, but this was a mistake these officers would regret. For now, she played along, letting the scene unfold. "Look," Jenkins said, leaning in closer, "you can make this easy or hard. We're not unreasonable. Got anything to tell us?" Emily's voice was cool, deliberate. "I've got nothing to say." Jenkins chuckled, shaking his head. "Suit yourself." He turned to Holt. "Cuff her." Holt approached, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. "You're under arrest for possession of a controlled substance," he said, his voice mockingly formal. "You have the right to remain silent, though something tells me you already knew that one." Emily offered no resistance as Holt secured her wrists, the cold metal biting into her skin. As she was led to the back of the squad car, she glanced over her shoulder at the 2 officers. They were laughing, their camaraderie built on years of shared misconduct. As the car pulled onto the road, Emily stared out the window, her mind racing. She wasn't just a librarian, as her spotless record suggested. She was an undercover CIA agent assigned to investigate corruption in law enforcement. This wasn't an accident. It was the opportunity she'd been waiting for. These officers had no idea who she really was, and she intended to keep it that way. For now. By the time they reached the station, Emily's strategy was already forming. She allowed herself to be processed, fingerprints, mugshot, the degrading pat-down without protest. Each step only fueled her resolve. She didn't need to fight this moment. She was playing the long game. Inside the interrogation room, Holt and Jenkins loomed over her, their smug confidence unwavering. "All right, Miss Jones," Holt said, dropping her bag onto the metal table between them. "Anything you want to confess?" Emily met his gaze, her voice steady. "You won't believe me if I tell you the truth." Jenkins laughed, a short, barking sound. "Oh, we've heard it all. Try us." Emily leaned back in her chair, her restrained posture radiating control. "No, I think I'll wait for my lawyer." Holt rolled his eyes, leaning closer. "Suit yourself. But let me tell you how this is gonna go. A judge is gonna see this evidence." He gestured to the planted drugs. "And you're going away for a long time. Think about what you want to say before it's too late." Emily said nothing, watching as they left the room, their laughter echoing in the hallway. She allowed herself a small, cold smile. They thought they had control, but they were digging their own graves. Once alone, Emily activated the hidden channel embedded in her watch, a secure line to her CIA handler. The device vibrated slightly as the connection established. Her handler's voice came through, calm and efficient. "Agent Jones, report." "I've been arrested," she said, her tone flat. "Planted evidence. Local officers. Corruption is clear." There was a pause before the handler replied. "Do you require extraction?" Emily shook her head, even though he couldn't see her. "No, this is exactly where I need to be. Proceeding as planned." "Understood. Stay in position and gather what you can." We're monitoring. The line went dead, and Emily leaned back in her chair, her mind already 2 steps ahead. This case would go to court and she would let it. Every lie the officers told, every piece of fabricated evidence they presented, would only tighten the noose around their necks. They had no idea who they were dealing with. The courthouse in Atlanta buzzed with its usual air of tension, heightened today by the high-profile case of Emily Jones. Inside the courtroom, fluorescent lights cast a harsh glow on the faces of the players in this unfolding drama. Officer Travis Holt and Officer Mike Jenkins sat confidently at the prosecutor's table, their smug expressions giving no indication of unease. They were seasoned manipulators, comfortable in their roles as lawful accusers. Emily, in stark contrast, exuded calm as she sat at the defense table beside her assigned public defender, Rachel Hayes. Rachel, a young and earnest lawyer with a tidy stack of files, leaned toward Emily. "It's not looking good," she whispered. "They have what appears to be damning evidence. Drugs found in your car, fingerprints on the bag. They don't have what matters," Emily replied evenly, her eyes fixed on the officers, who were trading quiet, self-assured glances. Judge Harris, a stern woman in her 60s with a no-nonsense demeanor, entered the courtroom, commanding silence. The prosecutor rose, beginning with a rehearsed opening statement painting Emily as a reckless criminal caught red-handed. As the prosecutor spoke, Holt and Jenkins nodded in unison, the picture of law enforcement cohesion. Emily listened in silence, her mind a storm of careful calculations. She knew she needed to give nothing away, not yet. She'd prepared for moments like these, though the stakes here were far higher than her typical CIA operations. She subtly adjusted her watch, activating the encrypted communication channel she'd use later. When it was Holt's turn to testify, he approached the stand with the swagger of someone who believed himself untouchable. Swearing in with exaggerated solemnity, he recounted a vivid but entirely fabricated narrative of how the traffic stop unfolded. "I asked her for her license and registration. Simple as that," Holt said. "But her hands were shaking. Her answers didn't add up. That's when I knew something was off. A search of the vehicle confirmed my suspicions." Rachel rose for cross-examination. "Officer Holt, you mentioned her shaking hands and suspicious behavior. Did you record this encounter?" Holt smirked. "Not this time, ma'am. The dashcam wasn't operational, unfortunately." Convenient, Emily thought. Jenkins followed with similar testimony, weaving a seamless story that only bolstered Holt's lies. The jury appeared engaged, absorbing every word, while Rachel struggled to poke holes in the meticulously rehearsed narrative. Emily maintained her composure, her face neutral, even as the prosecution's case seemed unshakable. That evening, back in her holding cell, Emily reviewed the hidden footage recorded by her CIA-issued surveillance equipment. Every second of the encounter had been captured, Holt planting the drugs, Jenkins sealing the scene with his fabricated tale. The crisp audio and video were indisputable proof of her innocence, and damning evidence of the officer's corruption. Using her secured communication channel, Emily uploaded the footage directly to her handler. "Evidence acquired," she reported. "Clean, conclusive. How do you want me to proceed?" Her handler's response was swift. "Maintain cover. Timing is critical. Deliver the blow at trial for maximum exposure." Emily smiled faintly. The trap was set. All that remained was for the officers to dig themselves deeper into it. In the courtroom, they were spinning their web of lies, blind to the net tightening around them. The next morning, the trial resumed with Rachel attempting to discredit the thin veneer of the prosecution's evidence. "The lack of dashcam footage, Your Honor, is troubling given the gravity of these accusations. Isn't it protocol for officers to ensure operational recording devices?" The prosecutor objected, waving Rachel's concerns away. "Protocols aren't infallible, Ms. Hayes. What matters is the physical evidence we have." The judge, appearing impartial but clearly leaning toward the prosecution, nodded. Sustained. Emily's faith in Rachel was firm but cautious. The young attorney was in way over her head, fighting an uphill battle against a rigged deck. It pained Emily to withhold the truth from her, But this wasn't just about clearing her own name. It was about exposing systemic corruption. Timing remained everything. For now, Emily sat in silence, a picture of patience, while Holt and Jenkins wore smug smiles of victory. They had no idea the depth of the fight they were about to lose. The courtroom was a theater of tension, each player performing their part in the escalating drama. Officer Travis Holt and Officer Mike Jenkins sat at the prosecution's table, their confidence unshaken, basking in the apparent success of their fabricated case. The jury seemed to lean toward believing the prosecution's narrative, bolstered by the compelling lies spun by the two officers. Emily Jones, sitting quietly at the defense table, maintained her poise. Her CIA training had taught her patience, but even she felt the mounting frustration as the prosecution methodically built its house of cards. Her public defender, Rachel Hayes, struggled valiantly but ineffectively against the tide. Rachel's objections were consistently overruled, and her cross-examinations, though earnest, lacked the firepower to dismantle the prosecution's carefully crafted story. As the trial proceeded, Emily observed the room with sharp precision. Every juror's twitch, every spectator's whisper, every deliberate pause by the prosecutor was a data point in her mental arsenal. She was operating on two fronts, maintaining her cover as an ordinary defendant while silently preparing to expose the entire corrupt framework of the case. The prosecution introduced the bag of drugs as evidence, dramatically displaying it for the jury to see. This, the prosecutor declared, was found in the defendant's vehicle in plain view during a routine traffic stop. It is irrefutable proof of her guilt. Rachel stood, her voice steady. Your Honor, I would like to request further analysis of this evidence. It is unusual that no fingerprints other than the defendant's were found, despite the bag allegedly being handled by law enforcement. The judge's expression was impassive. Denied. Move forward. Emily remained silent, her expression unreadable. Inwardly, she noted every instance of bias, every denial of Rachel's reasonable requests. It would all serve her when the time came to reveal the truth. That evening, alone in her holding cell, Emily activated the secure communication channel embedded in her watch. Her handler's voice came through almost instantly. Agent Jones, status update. The prosecution is presenting fabricated evidence as expected, she reported. The defense is struggling, but we anticipated this. Understood. Do you require extraction? Negative, Emily replied. I have the recordings from my hidden camera. They're clear and comprehensive. I will submit them as evidence at the appropriate moment. Copy that. Timing is critical. We're standing by. Ending the communication, Emily reviewed the footage once more on her encrypted device. The video captured everything. Holt reaching into the trunk of her car with the planted bag, Jenkins crafting his false narrative, their smug laughter as they orchestrated the scene. The audio was crystal clear, their arrogance on full display. Emily's lips curved into a faint, calculated smile. The evidence in her possession was a weapon, one that would not only clear her name but bring Holt, Jenkins, and possibly others in their network to justice. She was playing the long game, and every lie they told in court was tightening the noose. The next morning, the courtroom was tense as Rachel Hayes prepared to present the defense's case. Emily whispered to her as they waited for the judge's arrival. Stay steady. The truth has a way of surfacing. Rachel, though unaware of Emily's true identity and the arsenal of evidence she had, nodded, drawing strength from her client's calm demeanor. I won't give up, she promised. As Rachel cross-examined Officer Jenkins later that day, Emily observed with keen interest. Officer Jenkins, Rachel began, her tone sharp. You claim the defendant displayed erratic behavior, leading you to conduct the search. Could you specify exactly what you mean by erratic? Jenkins smirked, his confidence oozing from every word. She was nervous, avoided eye contact, and stuttered when answering basic questions. Yet there's no dashcam footage to corroborate this behavior? Rachel pressed. We don't always have functioning cameras, Jenkins replied smoothly. It's unfortunate, but it happens. Convenient, Rachel muttered under her breath, earning a brief smile from Emily. The prosecution rested its case, the jury seemingly swayed by the officer's rehearsed testimony and the theatrics of the evidence presentation. Emily, however, felt no fear. The stage was set for her move, and she would strike with precision. Back in her cell that evening, she contacted her handler again. "I need clearance to go public," she said. "The jury is leaning toward conviction based on their lies. It's time to reveal everything." There was a pause on the other end before her handler replied. "Permission granted. Deploy the evidence strategically. Ensure maximum impact." Emily leaned back, her mind racing. The courtroom would not be prepared for what she was about to unleash. The courtroom was silent as the prosecution rested their case, but the tension in the air was heavy. The jury seemed on the edge of conviction, nodding along to the rehearsed narratives presented by Officers Holt and Jenkins. Rachel Hayes, exhausted but determined, stood from her seat to begin the defense's opening arguments. However, before she could speak, Emily Jones raised a hand. "Your Honor, with all due respect, I request permission to represent myself from this point forward," Emily said, her voice firm but respectful. Rachel looked startled, but Emily gave her a reassuring nod. Judge Harris paused, examining Emily with a critical eye. "Are you certain, Ms. Jones? This is a serious decision." "I am certain, Your Honor," Emily replied with confidence. "I believe it is in the best interest of justice." Judge Harris hesitated, then nodded. "Permission granted. The floor is yours." Emily rose, her posture composed and commanding. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, her voice steady and powerful. "I have been silent throughout this trial, allowing the prosecution to paint me as a criminal. But now it is time to reveal the truth. Not just about me, but about the corruption that runs deeper than anyone here realizes." The gallery murmured in surprise, and even the jurors leaned in. Holt and Jenkins exchanged uneasy glances, their confidence beginning to falter. Emily walked to the center of the courtroom, activating a small, inconspicuous device on her watch. Within moments, the courtroom projector came to life, displaying a series of video clips on the large screen behind her. "This," she said, gesturing to the screen, "is footage from a hidden camera that I, as an operative of the Central Intelligence Agency, carry on all assignments. What you are about to see will expose not only the truth behind the events of that night, but also the systemic corruption these officers represent." The room erupted into gasps as the first clip played. It showed Officer Travis Holt pulling a small bag of white powder from his pocket and placing it into Emily's car trunk. The audio was crystal clear, capturing his voice as he laughed with Jenkins. "You think she'll buy this one?" Holt said in the video. Jenkins chuckled in response. "They always do." The jury stared at the screen in shock, their expressions shifting rapidly from confusion to disbelief and anger. The prosecutor rose to object, but Judge Harris silenced them with a sharp wave of her hand. "Sit down. I want to see this," she commanded. Emily continued to play the footage, including clips of Jenkins rehearsing the false story and the two officers laughing about their previous successes with fabricated cases. Every word, every action was a nail in the coffin of their credibility. "I have more," Emily said, pausing the video. "Emails, bank transactions, and further evidence linking these officers to a broader network of corruption in this department. But first, I would like to call a witness who will corroborate my identity and the legitimacy of this evidence." Judge Harris, struggling to maintain her composure amidst the bombshell revelations, nodded. "Proceed." "I call Agent Daniel Carter of the Central Intelligence Agency to the stand." The room erupted again. The crowd in the gallery buzzed with shock, and reporters scribbled furiously. Holt and Jenkins sat frozen, their earlier smugness replaced by pale faces and wide eyes. This was a development they had not seen coming. As Agent Carter entered the courtroom, his professional demeanor and CIA credentials left no room for doubt. He took the stand, swore in, and turned to Emily with a respectful nod. "Agent Carter," Emily began, "can you confirm my identity and my role within the CIA?" "Yes," Carter replied firmly. Agent Emily Jones has been undercover investigating corruption within local law enforcement agencies. Her arrest was an unfortunate but anticipated risk in the operation. The jurors exchanged stunned glances as Carter continued. The evidence she has presented is authentic and was obtained as part of her mission. Officers Holt and Jenkins have been under suspicion for years, and this case has confirmed their involvement in illegal activities. Emily turned to the jury, her voice resolute. This is the truth you deserve to know. These men used their authority to ruin lives for their own gain. But today, justice will prevail. The courtroom was electric with tension, and all eyes were on Emily as she prepared to deliver the final blow. Agent Daniel Carter's testimony had electrified the courtroom. Every word he spoke added weight to the mountain of evidence Emily Jones had revealed. The jurors sat transfixed, their earlier uncertainty replaced by a growing sense of outrage at the corrupt officers. Holt and Jenkins, once so confident, now looked cornered, their expressions betraying their fear. Agent Carter, Emily continued, pacing the courtroom with purpose. Can you confirm the authenticity of the footage and evidence I've presented today? Absolutely, Carter replied. The recordings, emails, and financial records were all obtained as part of your operation and have been verified by the agency. They conclusively prove that Officers Travis Holt and Mike Jenkins planted evidence, fabricated charges, and acted in direct violation of the law. The prosecutor, clearly rattled, stood to object. Your Honor, this testimony blindsided the prosecution. We request an adjournment to. Judge Harris silenced the prosecutor with a sharp glare. Request denied. This court will not tolerate further delays. Continue, Ms. Jones. Emily turned back to the jury, her voice resolute. You've heard their lies. You've seen the evidence of their corruption. But let me show you just how far-reaching this network really is. She clicked to the next slide on the screen, revealing a spreadsheet of transactions. These payments, large sums funneled into personal accounts connected to Holt and Jenkins, were made by individuals seeking to weaponize law enforcement against their enemies. This is not just about two corrupt officers. This is about a systemic abuse of power. The gallery erupted into murmurs, reporters furiously jotting down notes. Holt buried his face in his hands while Jenkins looked as though he might bolt from his seat. Judge Harris banged her gavel. Order in the court. As the room quieted, Emily stepped closer to the officers. Officers Holt and Jenkins, do you deny that these accounts belong to you? Do you deny these payments? Neither officer responded. Their silence spoke volumes. I didn't think so, Emily said, her tone cutting. And now, Your Honor, I call for the immediate arrest of these officers on charges of corruption, abuse of power, and obstruction of justice. Federal agents, who had quietly entered the courtroom during the proceedings, now stepped forward. The lead agent addressed Judge Harris. Your Honor, based on the overwhelming evidence presented, we are prepared to take Officers Holt and Jenkins into custody immediately. The judge nodded, her face stern. Proceed. The agents approached the table where Holt and Jenkins sat. Jenkins bolted to his feet, his voice panicked. This is a setup. She's lying. This is all fake. The lead agent ignored him, snapping a pair of handcuffs onto his wrists. Holt didn't resist, slumping in his chair as the realization of his downfall sank in. The courtroom erupted in applause as the two disgraced officers were led away. Emily turned to the jury, her expression one of quiet triumph. Justice is not just a concept. It's a responsibility. And today you've seen what happens when that responsibility is betrayed. But you've also seen what happens when we fight back. Judge Harris addressed the courtroom. Based on the evidence presented, all charges against Ms. Jones are dismissed. This court will submit a formal request for a broader investigation into the corruption within this department. Ms. Jones, you are free to go. The gallery burst into cheers, and Rachel Hayes turned to Emily with tears in her eyes. You didn't tell me who you really were, but thank you. You gave me hope that justice can still prevail. Emily placed a hand on Rachel's shoulder. You fought for me when you thought I was just another defendant. That means everything. As Emily walked out of the courthouse, the sunlight hit her face, and she breathed deeply. The mission was complete, but the fight for justice was never ending. The sun bathed the steps of the Atlanta courthouse in golden light as Emily Jones emerged. The weight of the trial finally lifted. The crowd outside erupted into cheers and applause, their voices echoing across the city. Reporters swarmed closer, microphones and cameras thrust forward to capture her first words as a free woman. Emily raised a hand, signaling for quiet. The crowd hushed, their anticipation palpable. "What happened here today," she began, her voice steady and clear, "is not just about me. It's about justice, justice for everyone who has ever been targeted, silenced, or wronged by those who abuse their power." Officers Holt and Jenkins thought they could exploit their authority without consequences. But today, we proved that no one is above accountability. The crowd cheered again, and Emily paused, letting the noise wash over her. Then, with a calm but commanding tone, she continued, "This fight isn't over. The corruption exposed in that courtroom goes beyond 2 officers. It's a system that has failed too many for far too long. My mission doesn't end here. It's a reminder to all of us. Never underestimate the power of truth, and never stop fighting for what's right." Emily stepped back, allowing the crowd's applause to swell. Reporters shouted questions, but she offered no further comments. Instead, she turned and walked toward an unmarked car waiting at the curb, where Agent Daniel Carter stood, holding the door open for her. "Quite a performance back there," Carter said as she slid into the passenger seat. "It wasn't a performance," Emily replied, fastening her seatbelt. "It was the truth." Carter nodded, shutting the door and moving around to the driver's seat. As they pulled away from the courthouse, Emily gazed out the window at the city that had been both a battleground and a stage for justice. "What's next?" Carter asked after a moment of silence. Emily didn't hesitate. "Back to work. There's still more to uncover." Her words were resolute, but her mind wandered briefly to the faces she'd seen in the courtroom. The jurors who had been swayed by the truth, Rachel Hayes, who had fought valiantly despite the odds, and even the crowd outside, whose faith in justice had been reignited. Each one reminded her why she did what she did. That evening, Emily sat in a quiet corner of a cafe, reviewing new case files provided by the CIA. Her focus was razor-sharp, her determination unshaken. The mission never truly ended, and she welcomed the challenge. She had won a battle, but the war against corruption was far from over. Her thoughts were interrupted by a notification on her secure device. It was a message from Rachel Hayes. "Thank you for everything," it read. "You've given me hope that even the impossible is possible. Let me know if you ever need backup." Emily smiled faintly, typing a brief reply. "Keep fighting the good fight." As the cafe buzzed with the ordinary hum of life, customers chatting, coffee machines whirring, Emily felt a rare moment of peace. She had faced injustice head-on and emerged victorious, but most importantly, she had sent a message. No matter how powerful or untouchable corruption might seem, it could always be brought to light. She stood and left the cafe, her stride confident, her gaze set firmly on the path ahead. The night sky stretched above her, vast and full of possibilities. This wasn't the end of her story. It was only the beginning. This story concludes with Emily Jones emerging victorious, exposing corruption while reflecting on the unending fight for justice. The narrative underscores themes of resilience, accountability, and hope, leaving readers with a call to action, to never stop seeking truth and challenging injustice. Let me know if you'd like to dive deeper into any aspect. I hope you enjoyed this story. Leave a comment sharing your thoughts about it. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new and equally exciting stories. See you in the next video.